ironically. Long clout. Well, some of us already have clout, mate.
Yeah, I don't have any clout.
You don't get to be 16 stone and not have clout.
I don't have any clout physically or personality wise. So
No, I mean, well, I certainly don't have personality wise. That's why I have to get so fat.
Hi everybody and welcome to Short Fuse. I'm Duncan Roberts and I'm here with Ollie O'Donoghue. Hey Ollie.
Hello Duncan.
Oh, come on, I'm trying to keep it chipper. Come on, hi Ollie.
That was chipper. That's surprisingly chipper, I think.
Okay, all right, we're not going to get into this again. Today we're going to be voting on space. Probably need to be a bit more specific than just space. Let's call it space travel, space exploration, shall we? Something like that.
Yeah.
And whether we're long or short on it. There's a lot of space stuff going on at the moment, from crazy cool things going on with rocket design to celebrities being shipped into space to space mining and satellites. So how long or short are we on space exploration / travel? Ollie, hit me with your vote.
Long.
Right.
Long. But not for, and I know we were debating whether or not this would come up. I think we just get it up immediately. I'm not long on the celebrities wandering around in a ship and going into space. That I find very irritating.
Yeah.
But space exploration generally, I'm long.
I see. I want to be like, I'm a big fan. I used to be a big fan as a kid and as a young adult of kind of looking at Dorling Kindersley books of rockets and having models of rockets and thinking about space and stargazing and all that kind of stuff. And I still love, looking out for Jupiter and seeing if I can see the Milky Way and thinking about how small we are in relation to everything in space. But I kind of absolutely hate what's going on with space exploration at the moment. And I find it a little bit objectionable in a lot of ways. So I want to be short, but unfortunately I am long that it will continue. Is my view.
You're dead against it across the board. You're not even from a science and discovery point of view. You're morally, you kind of think, hey, we should, because it's a big argument, isn't it? That there's enough problems for us to solve on this planet.
Quite, yeah. And I understand that a lot of people say, to solve some of the problems on our planet, we need to get out and explore further, or the planet won't last forever, we need to go somewhere else. But that, to me, is just objectionable. And I do think that a lot of money is being spent on stuff to kind of for vanity projects, and, the new age space race where who can do this quicker between multiple billionaires, rather than just focusing on the quite considerable issues that we face on this planet at the moment. And I know that's a fairly simplistic view, but it's from what I observe of the billionaire space race, and even some of the scientific stuff going on in terms of how can we mine the moon or other planets for its natural resources. I still think, I just find it very hard to digest when we could focus that effort elsewhere.
I find the whole we can make a fortune in space to be ludicrous as a concept. The mining one in particular, because the sheer cost of getting equipment up to, let's say, the moon. You really want to mine some moon rock. There is stuff you could mine on the moon, apparently.
Is helium on the moon? Is there He3? I don't know. I read it somewhere a couple of days ago and forgot.
I think there's all sorts of stuff you can get up there. Apparently,
cheese,
indeed.
Yeah.
Cheese famously. But the cost of going up there and getting it back is just ridiculous. And to put that into perspective, landlocked countries. This is just like an economic principle. It just shows you how crazy the idea that you'll be able to get some, cheaper natural resources from the moon that you would elsewhere on the planet. Landlocked countries have a lower development rate than any other, like a country with a port or a coast, because they can't access shipping containers, right? Which doesn't sound relevant, but that's a relatively minor earthbound problem And there are vast natural resources in landlocked countries that just aren't worth getting hold of. Like, it's not cost effective on this planet. The same natural resources that you could get on the moon.
Yeah,
it's big because they're landlocked. So because shipping is the cheapest and easiest way to get hold of the resources, and it just doesn't make financial sense. So with that in mind, why would jettisoning equipment up to the moon and then firing it back at Earth ever be something, with our existing technology that's more cost effective than?
Because it's the modern day land grab, isn't it? It's the modern day, like, oh, look at what's in my trousers. It's bigger than yours, like from either through billionaires or through geopolitical states, like just competing. But like the other thing is we've messed up this planet enough by doing various things.
That's why we need to get off of it, Duncan.
we've messed it up enough. Like, who's to say that mining the moon doesn't, I don't know, mess. I mean, I am not an expert in this, but I just have this feeling that we would do something and go, whoops, we've put the moon out of orbit and all the tides are messed up, and it's now going to crash into us tomorrow. Sorry.
It's true though. There's all sorts of talk about mining and things like that. You would do dynamite, see what's below the surface, and these are vast bodies that you're probably not going to do a huge amount of damage. But one of the things that they're talking about is return travel. So if you can get up to the moon, there is, they think, water on the moon, which they didn't in the 80s.
We got water down here.
No, right, but what water is useful for?
Oh, right, sure, to use on the moon, right?
Yeah, but not as it is. So not for drinking, but to split apart. So the hydrogen and the oxygen, and then use that as fuel. And a lot of people are saying, well, look, all you're doing then is going to another planet, consuming its resources for no real ecological environmental benefit to the planet, and doing exactly what we've done here. So there are a few people. So actually, if you really want to get to the moon and back and make this kind of conveyor belt of Katy Perry-esque space wanderers, then there are better ways to do it. For example, electromagnetism. Or something, there are electromagnetic launchers, but the default pathway seems to be, hey, we'll go up there and we'll just use those resources and screw up that planet in our bid to do it. And like I say, what are you getting up there? What's that used for that you can't it's cheaper and easier in comparison to find those resources elsewhere on the planet.
I mean, you did say something to me a little while ago when we were first kind of chatting about this, that I bore in mind, but I still don't necessarily agree with, which is that better to mine it up there than mine it down here. So it does, you're kind of moving that issue to a different planet, which is right, which is understandable, but still, I would rather focus on how to do things without wasting that resource or leveraging what we have more efficiently, rather than potentially going and doing something in the unknown that really is catastrophic in the long run.
Right. Just for our listeners' benefit, so I don't come across completely insane. It's a theoretical idea that, like, instead of having, an iron mine or whatever it is in Cardiff, in Wales, where I think there are iron ores to this day if they haven't been shut down by Thatcher. You could do that on the moon, so you wouldn't have the ecological impact to Wales. But the externality of all the rocket fuel that you would need to fire up, you certainly would experience. So it's probably worse. Also, just really suddenly iron would cost an absolute fortune.
Yeah,
it'd be a nightmare.
But speaking of like rocket launchers, and you mentioned like how like electromagnetics and there's that idea about space elevators, isn't there? Having just a lift that can get you into space. So I just got to let my dog out. Oh, there you go, mate. It's raining out there, so you probably won't want to do it. But you mentioned about the launching mechanisms. One of the things, so I still find kind of childlike joy in seeing something really cool, and that's moved on from like a massive rocket ship to things that I think are like, wow, that's a really interesting way to think around the problem. And there's basically a space catapult that they want to bring online, which is just a huge, great big circle where they spin a satellite round using and build up that centrifugal force, and then just literally whip it into space via essentially a catapult. And that brings out that kind of childlike joy and excitement, seeing something really cool. But it's less the technical capability, more the kind of, wow, that's absolutely fundamentally different from what I've seen so far, and really exciting. But still, the whole idea about just whipping more and more and more satellites into the atmosphere is somewhat repulsive, considering, you see those images of Earth with all the satellites and all the space junk hanging around it. That's terrifying. Oh, gosh, what are we doing to not just ourselves but space as well? And I don't want to come across as some sort of a naysayer, because I do find the idea about exploring space and understanding space will give us a better idea of our place in it and advance some technologies. But from my limited view at the moment, it just seems limited to, right, what can we get from it that will make us richer? And I don't think that's the right way to go about it.
And that's really uncertain. I mean, on to the point about throwing more stuff into space. I mean, there's the Kessler syndrome theory, which I think is really interesting, where the more crud basically floating around the planet, the more likely it is to bang in to other bits, break up, and then create even more likelihood that other bits will bang in. And eventually it means that you just can't get anything in space because it's going to hit something on the way up. And yeah, there are those websites and applications that show you all of the stuff that's floating around. It's very difficult to actually see the Earth through all of the little green dots of bits
and some of it's right, like infinite. I can't say that word. Really small,
little.
Yes, very little. But still, that moving at how many thousands of miles an hour, just slamming through a spaceship or someone's body, is quite dramatically awful.
Yeah, and the stuff that goes up is fragile, so it doesn't take a lot to damage something. But the part of it, like the economic viability of it, I think is the most interesting part, given where we are right now. This
For
was
you. I think toys. You're like, oh, economically.
Sure. But for everyone, because the space race up until very recently has been nation versus nation. And I mean, in there, I think, in the early days, it was really just about political clout. I mean, that's almost all it was political clout and a little bit of science thrown in. Whereas now there are thousands of startups, the big companies like SpaceX that are dominating most of the space, but loads of different startups, like, say, talking about slingshotting mass into space or developing bots that can mine the moon and all sorts of innovation going on. What's particularly interesting about that is there was this big piece of research released called Demand Drivers of the Lunar Economy, something like that effectively analysed most of the big startups to find out how they're planning on being funded. Because one of the biggest, I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions is that this becomes an almost self-sustaining economy, i.e. there'll be enough Katy Perrys that want to go into space that it more than pays for the rocket, and as a result, your organisations like NASA can do their science much cheaper, which is semi-true. But most of their organizations and startups that were analyzed in this piece of research, and it's massive, by the way, it's like 187 pages long. I haven't got through all of it. Almost all of them are banking on government contracts. They will only exist if NASA gives them loads of money or another nation's space agency gives them loads of money. And some of the smaller portion of economic momentum, economic drivers from things like households or people like you or me, are so tiny, it's almost negligible. So it even goes into detail around space memorials. So there is demand, it seems, for if you were to die, Duncan, perish the thought, we could,
I will do one day.
Yeah.
We all will, Ollie. I'm sorry to bring some existential dread.
I disagree with that. I think I'll be fine. But I think it's wise for you to prepare. Certainly.
Well, I'm like 13 years older than you, or something, whatever it is.
Yeah, but you mean look at the state of me. Come on.
Anyway, we digress.
So let's say you do perish, and your wish is to go into space. We could cremate you and then send those ashes in. I can't remember. There are some prices in there, like $12,000 for that to happen. There are companies looking to offer that as a service, but it just wouldn't be enough. Like none of that would be enough to make it economically viable. And the only way it would work is if governments are already sending rockets into space using bigger companies like SpaceX, and you just booked in a little bit of that space for your ashes. Something like that would happen. So even the big narrative around, hey, there's this big space economy blooming, there's all sorts of startups doing interesting things, and it's not really a government versus government thing, seems to be untrue. Based on this analysis, and this is it's incredibly detailed. As I say, it goes up to 2040, so it's predicting right through to 2040, and that's now the big defense from startups is like, oh yeah, but we're thinking about 2100. We're not thinking about 2040. But that to me is the biggest reason to be short on a lot of the smaller companies that are saying like, oh, we're going to do this really cool thing. It's like, well, yeah, sure, only if national bodies continue to invest in this area, and they may not do. To your point, it might be like there's a catastrophe that we need to deal with, and we'd rather spend our money on that or something.
But also, there's a good precedent for that, right? Where as a human race, we landed on the moon in the 60s, and then a few times, and then just never went back because it just not. There's no reason to do it,
right?
So if those reasons run out or they become too economically unviable, that progress still stands, but like we just plateau, which is a little bit. And I know I'm just talking about lunar landings, and lots more went on since then in advancements of space travel and the stuff that you can do in space with satellites, etc. But still, there is a precedent for going, well, we've done that now. What's next? And is it economically viable and worth it to do more? So it would be interesting to kind of track that.
Well, the moon is massively in scope, and I guess that's what that spurred on this big piece of research around the lunar economy. And I think its target market is NASA, so NASA can kind of, because it is cheaper for NASA to operate with all of these different private companies taking up a chunk of the cost effectively and coming up with new ways of doing things. But I think the idea is that the moon becomes a launch pad for deeper space. So I think that's the target, is like, hey, if we can build some sort of way of not living on the moon, like me and you going up there and having an apartment that overlooks the Earth or something like that and spending loads of money on it, but scientists, astronauts being able to base there, like the International Space Station, your ability to then launch and explore other areas of space is much greater. There's this really interesting stat from, I can't remember, I think it's someone at NASA. You think about the entire human history that we've been on this planet, our total amount of time spent on the moon is 2 weeks. The cumulative amount of time that we spent on the moon is 2 weeks, which is crazy when you think about how long ago it was that we went up there.
Well, yeah, quite. And it's like because there's no reason to. And I think it's that reasoning, like is there any point in sending people up there? I mean, they've sent all sorts of lunar rovers and Mars rovers, and it's cool. And I'm not intelligent enough or close enough to the science to understand its relevance to everyday life. All I see is, and all a lot of people see, is Katy Perry going to the moon, Richard Branson setting up a space company, Elon Musk setting up a space company. And it's like, why are you doing this, guys? Like, is it just for clout and cash? And I feel like that's taken over the space race that once was purely scientific, and that's when it was exciting. Now it's just become it's indicative of our society as a whole. It's just become almost like an influencer trait more than anything else.
I think that's the tragedy of it, to be honest. That I think probably 99.9% of it still is scientific.
Yeah,
it's a reinvigorated version of the exploration we had when the space race was first on. People are going out there to find answers. There's all sorts of experiments going on, but the part that captures public attention is the, dare I say it, space phallus race. Here are these billionaires launching space phalluses with Katy Perry on them, and that's good. And what's interesting is I think during the early phases of the space race, people were largely on side. There was that us versus them thing. Yeah. And then around the 90s, suddenly people were going like, what are we doing this for? And there's a massive uptick in articles published on is space exploration worth it?
Yeah.
And it did kind of die out, and then it was reinvigorated. But then, kind of from the pandemic onwards, I think there's a lot more discussion around like, is it worth it? Like, why are we spending our money? It shows you how cyclical things can be based on what my imagination. What I imagined was the catalyst for that is the pandemic. Like, hey, there's all of this stuff going on Earth, which again kind of happened during the 90s. When you think about, I think things like acid rain and climate change starting to come into
acid rain.
public
Gosh,
discourse.
that's a throwback. I remember
Acid
whenever
rain.
it rained when I was a kid, it was like, is it acid rain? Like, am I going to
believe-
melt if I go out?
It was. I mean, it's crazy, really, isn't it? Because it was the same for me growing up. That was all anyone talked about, and I think those kind of environmental topics of conversation meant everyone was going like, "Well, let's stop going to space then, and that will solve it, maybe." And that's kind of what feels like it's happening now. And the Katy Perry launch has just cemented in a lot of people's heads, like, oh, is this just a billionaire's playground suddenly? And it's not true, I don't think. I think it's
I don't think it is true. But as I say, I think that's the perception that is overriding, whereas the perception beforehand was much more scientific. Even if it is, and of course it is still fundamentally scientific, the perception of it and the geopolitical perception of it is what influence or clout can we get for doing this, and B, what money can I make from it? And there was this kind of, people talk about the 90s being this kind of golden time, looking back at it on rose-tinted glasses. And I think, whereas that's fundamentally not true, there was lots of bad things going on there. I think that the current way in which we're looking at space is reflective of the geopolitical environment that we exist within at the moment. You think about the International Space Station, you had Americans, Europeans, Russians are Europeans, but you know what I mean? Like, you have the different space agencies all working together to create a holistic space station where it was made up of parts from this country and that country, and astronauts from different previously competing places would work together, and it was all the brilliance that would entail. And now everybody's going, well, I want to get to the moon first to mine it first. I'm going to get to the dark side of the moon. And it's become a competition again rather than a way of us working together to reach a common goal of scientific knowledge. And it's become billionaires going, I can do this first, and countries going, I can do that first. And it is indicative of where we are as a society, I think.
Well, there's an argument that the greater involvement of the private sector neutralizes some of that geopolitical conflict. I can't think of the right word, but we go conflict to an extent, because a lot of the big global private companies that are going to be part of this will take money from everyone. I mean, why wouldn't you? And they'll, and there are a lot of big collaboration agreements where, Canada pays 2.5%, the US pays 20%, the UK pays 1%, whatever, and they're pretty decent across the board. I was reading an article this morning that said that effectively space exploration is one of the few areas where everyone is still largely collaborating together. But then, to your point, that's not always the perception. So there are a lot of stories out there that talk about how China is exploring how you'd use satellites to dogfight in space and knock other people's satellites out if they needed to. And I dare say the Americans are probably doing a similar thing to see how they can knock
Space
different.
Force now, don't they? The Americans,
right? The United States Space Force, absolutely. So there is that kind of conflict still going on, but you get that anywhere. I think you get it in cybersecurity here on Earth. You get it in trade. Which is obviously quite political now, but the collaboration I think is still there. It largely because it's just so expensive.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just absolutely expensive. So if everyone collaborates, then you can just get much more done. And the hope is that continues, and that's probably one of the only positive signs that I can see about a richer private sector ecosystem, is they have less concern around geopolitical clout than their governments do.
Yeah.
In the same way that we see it with AI, which is an area that we're perhaps a little bit closer to. A lot of the big AI companies would happily have their products globally. Their home countries might regulate them and say, well, you can't put your chips in this country, you can't export these here, or you can't allow access here. But they would, I think, quite happily see their products go elsewhere, and I think that will happen with space travel too. The more private sector is involved.
Would you, if space travel was affordable and safe, would you do it?
Like as a tourist, so
Yeah.
just going into space for a bit and then coming down. No, probably not. No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Well,
you how
barely
much
leave the house anyway. So.
Exactly. I don't go on buses, mate, so I'd be surprised if I went on a spaceship. But I know a lot of people that do. I think my dad would love to. He talks about it all the time. I think he'd love to go out. So I if I had enough money and it was cheap and safe, I could, a Virgin Experience day that put him in space for his birthday, then yeah, sure, I'd buy that. I wouldn't have a problem with consuming it if it wasn't ludicrously expensive or massively ecologically damaging.
Yeah, I just, I'd like to say I wouldn't, and of course there's be a part of me that would just love to do it. I remember watching a TV show where the presenter went up in the name of the plane, the stealth plane, the U-2 that goes up to and you could see the curvature from the Earth. And that's not strictly speaking in space, but still like very grounding experience for a human being. And that's what these celebrities have had. So me kind of sitting here going, I'd like to do it is a little bit hypocritical.
Oh, you'd be insufferable at dinner parties.
Yeah, I really would. I really would. But I struggle to say no. I absolutely wouldn't do it. Then again, I get scared going on a plane. Like takeoff and the turbulence I find absolutely terrifying. So, like, put me on a rocket or in a catapult.
Yeah, that's right.
I'd be in a terrible place.
I would quite happily pay for you to be in the one that spins you around like 5,000 times and flies you off into space.
Fling my corpse into space.
Yeah, I'd happily cover the cost of that one and just say like, look, because someone's got to try it out, Duncan.
Yeah. All right. Like final quick question: aliens, yay or nay?
Oh, definitely. Statistically, just incredibly probable, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you have infinite of anything, then the chances are maybe we're the aliens. Who knows? But I loved the X-Files as a kid, mate. I mean, if the FBI are listening, which they definitely are, oh come on, guys, let me join. I'll be great.
I'm the same. But I you're reading about the old the Fermi paradox, right? Where the universe is so huge. Why haven't we encountered aliens yet, or aliens encountered us? And there's various theories about why we haven't encountered aliens yet. My favorite being that the aliens are just like, oh, I'm not going there. That looks horrible.
Yeah, that's right. These guys are weird, man. Yeah. They're so weird. But it's a paradox, though, isn't it? That's the beauty of it. So because the universe is so vast, statistically, there should be aliens around. And the reason we haven't come across them is because the universe is so vast.
Yeah.
They can cancel each other out.
Yeah. But I do like to think of them all looking down on us and just go, oh, it's like an episode from The Simpsons. Like, let's just leave them to it.
I hope so. I'm big-headed enough to believe they're watching me and only me.
Yeah. I always remember my old English teacher at school saying this, and this is one, I think it's one response to the Fermi paradox, is that aliens could already be here. They're just so different to us that our brains can't comprehend them. And even if there was an alien like standing next to you, you'd just be like, I can't see it because I just don't understand it.
Well, it's possible that there are a lot of things that we don't perceive at all. I'm not going into the hey, there's an alien sitting next to me and I just can't, I can't feel it because they're made of magnets or something. But like the idea that there's a lot around us that we just haven't developed an organ to perceive. We've got eyes for seeing certain things. We've got ears for hearing certain things. It's possible there are other things that we just haven't developed or evolved a way of observing.
Yeah.
I'm massively behind that. I don't know if it's, perceiving aliens. I suspect there are just some really annoying noises that we don't have to hear.
Well, I'm just going to say this. There was a book that I was reading, and it was like a horror story, and it was about kind of ghosts and supernaturalness. But there was an analogy that really stuck out with me. That was, imagine if you're just a 2D person living in a 2D world, and somehow a 3D person entered that, but you could only ever see 2 dimensions of them because that's your entire world. You could never perceive what that 3D person was like. at all because you could only ever see in 2 dimensions. And I'm explaining that really badly, but that's the upshot of it. Like there are things that we see and things that we experience that we don't understand because like as you say, our perception is based on the world that we live in, not in some other way. So who knows? Maybe they're already here and they're living amongst us. And actually, you said they're made of magnets. Maybe they're just made of fire engines and VW Beetles, and they occasionally just transform into big robots.
For a second, I was genuinely just like, how would we not be able to observe both of those things? And then, like, now I understand. Now I understand. Right? I'm with you. Like, but I mean, Duncan, that'd be really obvious if there was a thing walking around that was made of fire engines. I don't think I can perceive fire engines.
Yeah, I still find that amazing that an alien species would be a fire engine that turned into a big robot. Anyway.
What is that? Is that Transformers?
Transformers.
I've never watched. I don't. It's not for me.
What? Even as a kid, Optimus Prime. I mean,
No,
I'm not
it's
talking
not
about
for
the
me.
Michael Bay films because I've not watched them, but I'm talking about like the cartoons.
So it's a planet of fire engines that.
I don't really know. Like maybe they just assume the form of a fire. And this is not going where I hoped it would go. I was hoping we were going with a very profound 2D, 3D analogy, and now I'm talking about Transformers. So do you know what? Probably not worth continuing.
Ironically, though, I suspect given a lot of our spear point analysis and controversial opinions, it's our inability to articulate the value of Transformers as a series that's going to get us the most hate mail. Like I can imagine, like of all of the, I can't believe you guys, how dare you? Seriously, I suspect we'll get an email now.
All right. Well, I look forward to it. All right. Okay. Where are you on space travel now after that discussion? Still the same?
Still long. Yeah, still long. I think the scientific discovery part of it's important. I don't at all buy into, hey, we should mine, planets or do space burials and that'll more than cover the cost. But I think the exploration part's still important. Yeah,
I'm going to stay short, honestly, because I have a feeling that the perception will undermine the reality, if you know what I mean. So I that's my concern, that I'll stamp down and stand by. So we'll see.
I'm going to space, mate. Don't know where you're going.
Well.
NASA, who are listening to this, would be like, well, if you're going to be like that, Duncan, you're not going into space on our
We had you on the list, but now you're not coming.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Leading futurist Duncan Roberts, scratched off the list.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back next time. I'm off to stare at the planets. See you later. Say bye,
Cheerio.
Ollie. Oh.
Yeah. Well, don't.
Sorry.
Come on.
All right. Say bye, Ollie.
How come you get a fun little quip at the end, don't you? Like, I'm off to look at the planets, and I just say bye, which is, I suppose, is rooted into
You could do a quip. Like nobody's stopping you. I'm not stopping you. Go for it.
As Katy Perry astutely observed, we are taking up space. I think she said the opposite, didn't she? We're making space, not taking up space.
What?
That's what Katy Perry said. Katy Perry said, we're not taking up space.
Right.
We're making space.
For what?
Don't know. You should ask her.
Oh, yeah, I'll just give her a bell. All right, thanks for that, Ollie. We'll see you next time.